At my paternal grandparents' house in Maine, on the back of every door, my grandmother posted a typed page of house rules. With 17 grandchildren and 8 great-grandchildren running around, my Granny, First Lady Barbara Bush, wanted to make clear what she expected of us. These rules were simple, practical guidelines for keeping the house running smoothly, but they also taught us respect. My grandfather, President George H.W. Bush, whom I called Gampy, had a list of guidelines for us too. They were words of advice for living a life of passion and meaning. Their humility and kindness as familiar as the loop and the cursive of his handwriting.
Love you, Gampy, you did it! You did.
Don't get down when your life takes a bad turn. Don't blame others for your setbacks. When things go well, always give credit to others.
How many jumps have we made?
This will be our 3rd jump, sir.
Could you love a man anymore?
No. No. He is an awesome man.
My maternal grandparents don't have airports or schools named after them. Jenna and Harold Welch, whom I called Grammy and Pa, worked as a housewife and a home builder. They never posted rules on doors, and yet I watched them live by their own codes, and I learned from them. Don't be intimidated by people who have a better education or more money. Kindness is more valuable than any fortune. Regardless of what you do, be proud of working hard to take care of your family. Read widely. This year has been one of the most profound of my life, full of both glorious love and terrible loss. As long as I'm alive, my grandparents will not be forgotten. I'll tell their stories to my children so that their spirits live on in our family, and they will be by my side as I walk through life. I hear their voices in the letters they sent me and in my memories. They offer comfort, support, and guidance, and I will listen to them always.
I think people long for the Gampys of the world.
Welcome to this virtual George and Barbara Bush Foundation event. I'm excited about tonight's event because I have the opportunity to talk to someone I love about a book that talks about people I love. Jenna Bush Hager was destined to be a TV personality because ever since she was a little girl, she loved to entertain us. It's no wonder that Jenna is a sensation as the co-host of Today with Hoda and Jenna. She's a journalist, author, and teacher, but I know her best as an outstanding mother to Mila, Poppy, and Hal, a beloved daughter to her parents, a loving sister, a devoted niece, and an adoring wife to Henry Hager, who, Jenna, your mother calls a saint. But if you read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about. So hello, Jenna.
Hi. Thank you so much for having both of us. And you know that it's going to be a fun and maybe emotional night when you cry at the trailer that starts.
Exactly. It was
But I love seeing you, and I'm so glad so many of you all joined us.
Yes, it's wonderful. There are hundreds of people here tonight, Jenna. And all because of your wonderful book. First of all, the title is so beautiful, Everything Beautiful in Its Time, Seasons of Love and Loss. And it's based on a Bible verse, a beautiful Bible verse, Ecclesiastes 3:11, which is, I'll read it so people know, He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. So how, Jenna, did you come up with that title?
Well, and I love that you didn't have to read it, that you had it memorized, because it is one of my favorite Bible verses. But I came up with the title at my grandmother Jenna's funeral, who you saw in that video. She was from Midland, Texas, and she lived in the same house that my grandpa Harold built until she basically had to move to the old folks home. And at her funeral, it was a small funeral because, as my dad says, when you lived in 99, all your friends have passed away. And so my dad and mom wrote the funeral. And so they in turn picked out that Bible verse, which is when you read it, when you're going through times of grief or loss. I mean, even this year, I've found myself looking at it when there's been so much hurt in our country, because it is a Bible verse about hope, I think, about what God creates. And I even though, and I know you know this because we've talked about it, and you love them maybe more than anybody, but when you lose people that you love in a really short period of time, the grief comes in waves. It's enormous. But what I think happens is you realize that the grief and even itself is precious, because you wouldn't grieve somebody that you didn't love the way that we loved Ganny and Gampy and the way I loved my grandmother, Jenna. You wouldn't grieve the way that our family collectively grieved. So it's, to me, almost like a symptom of love, grief. And so to find the joy in it and the beauty in it, which I think is what everybody's goal is when they lose somebody that they love, is, to me, speaks to that Bible verse.
Mm-hmm. And so, this book is essentially a love letter to your grandparents. I like to say it's a book of gratitude of life's beautiful moments. What was it like, putting it together and remembering all these things?
Mm-hmm. Well, I started writing it as really, and this sounds odd, but for myself. And it wasn't something to be published. I journal write in the mornings, some before work, and I particularly write in moments of I think everybody does. If you look at your journal, it's like, I'm in love, or this really hurts. You write when there's big moments, and I know know that it felt big to lose these people we love so much. And so I wrote, I started, the first part of this book that I wrote was actually a letter to Ganny for myself, one that she would never read, one that I had no intention of publishing, but really just, and you also know this feeling, and you're going to have to do it with me again at some point, which is hard to think about. But Ganny really taught us, and that shirt tie combination is really bad. We've actually asked my mother why she allowed me to wear that to the White House. Because if you look at, like, your daughter was dressed in a beautiful kind of pinafore, a traditional outfit, and I was wearing something from Limited too. Yeah, more like this. See, this example would have been proper at the White House, but unfortunately, my mother allowed me to go dressed like that. No, but our Ganny, who was such a force of a woman, just a matriarch in every single sense, was really taught us so much, both by action and by word, sometimes many, many words. But she, one of the things that I think she taught us all, and that I've realized she taught us, is how to publicly grieve, which was something that you cannot expect. It's not like we were, or maybe you, Doro, I should ask you if you were anticipating this as the daughter of a president.
Well, I didn't really. I didn't think of it, although Dad used to have funeral meetings all the time. And I used to think that was so weird and odd, but he had them for 20 years before he died. And so, I guess I did have a sense of the public part of it, but it was hard. And in your book, I really could relate to that part. When you said, after, I think it was Ganny died, and you were watching the news, and I was watching the news, and
yeah.
I remember hearing people that were good friends of, moms out sort of waxing and waning about this and that about her, and felt like you did. That's just so uncomfortable, because I don't even know who that person is.
And it can't help but hurt, because it's like you have this, you're already hurting. You have this open wound. You're missing these people. You're grieving them just like you grieve, anybody would grieve a mother or a father or grandfather or grandmother. And then to hear, and there were unkind things said, but even sort of the baseless things felt like raw or something. It felt, yeah. And that's the right word. And so I think, so I was by myself, so I kept watching. I don't know if you felt that way, but Henry was gone and Barbara wasn't in the city. So once the girls were asleep, I was just looking at the TV, and finally I pulled myself away and wrote my own letter. I think there was like somebody that acted like she was a, Bush insider, which is also just so odd, say something, oh, we always knew she would go first. And and not that just hurt, because that's not what we thought. I mean, it's not what I thought, but also to predict somebody, anyway, it felt raw and it felt hurtful. So I started to write, and I wrote for myself. And I would recommend to anybody that feels grief or loneliness or, any of the emotions, it's easy just to turn on the TV. And I do this even now, but try to write about it. And I think Ganny and Gampy did that so often, especially Ganny. She was just such a journaler.
Both of them really were. I mean, I think Dad expressed himself best through the written.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's the other thing. Maybe they weren't even just writing for themselves. If they felt like they wanted to express something, they wrote it in a letter.
Right. And we all have, piles of letters from both Mom and Dad, which are amazing. So, so if you're lucky enough, like you were and I was for a period of my time, to know our grandparents, it's really a special relationship. And this book really promotes that relationship. So talk about what your grandparents taught you.
I mean, I think, I talked with Sam, who's Doro's son, the other night. And I think one thing that I've realized is one of the reasons why, for us, particularly with Ganny and Gampy, even though I, had my grandmother Jenna for a long time, she suffered with dementia for probably the last, maybe a dozen years of her life. But Ganny and Gampy were such great physical shape for a long time. And definitely, really, until both of them died, you could have great conversations with them. And so what we've realized is we had that experience with them as little kids playing games and reading books. And then they were our grandparents as teenager. I mean, that horrible, again, Jordache look, as, preteens, and then, and teenagers, and would do funny things and would just really protect us, I think. And then I had the luck of they got to speak at my wedding. They got to go to a lot of our weddings.
Yeah.
And so to experience those relationships, those little mini relationships, I think is so very precious. And so I think they taught us different things in each stage. I think Ganny was about rules, which taught us respect. I mean, it really did. It taught us respect. I remember being in Maine this summer after she passed away and tracking sand in with the girls from the beach and thinking, oh, Ganny, I mean, luckily my mother's also cares about sand, but tracking sand in and thinking, Ganny, I need to get out the dustbuster, Ganny, or sweep, Ganny and she always made us better. And I think
literally had rules on the door. You mentioned, it was mentioned in the video.
Yeah.
But I mean,
so that was her
one rule. It was like 10 rules. And
that was to keep a house in order. I'm now like, you wonder why, kind of. I mean, and a lot of this book, I think, is me placing things, some of it's just my perception on it. And now that I have little kids, I mean, I'm probably more like my my Ganny in some ways, than I was like who I'm named after, Jenna Welch. I'm a lot like Ganny, and I like a sense of order. I like a clean house. And I think when she had so many kids there, she wanted us there, but she also wanted things done her way. But in turn, it taught us respect, because some of the rules were things like pick up your towels so that somebody else doesn't have to. And those are rules that we should all learn.
Right. Don't be on time. Show up for breakfast. Don't be waiting and all of that.
Yes.
But your grandmother, Jenna, who was so lovely, she had a different way to teach you. It was more her by example, or she lived her codes for you and Barbara.
Yeah, she did. And they were very, very different. But in some ways, I actually think they were similar. And I know I've seen since pictures of them speak, at our weddings, sitting right. I think Ganny would make sure that they would see each other. But in some ways, they were similar. They both loved to read. They both loved to learn. They were curious about people. Ganny and Jenna asked great questions. They wanted to hear from others and not just talk all the time themselves. And I remember, so at my grandmother Jenna's funeral, which was just such a juxtaposition between Ganny's, because of course Ganny was the first lady. At the funeral, I said to my mom, in that picture right there, did Grammy ever feel intimidated? Just because not only was she the vice president's wife, but Ganny grew up in Rye, New York. Her father worked in New York City. Like for a woman from Midland, Texas, that might feel intimidating. And my mom said, no. And she would have known. She said, Grammy wasn't the type to feel intimidated. And she wasn't, she was gentle and loving and played with Barbara and I till we were about that age. She would slide down the slide with us, which, if you're a grandmother, do that, because your grandkids just can't believe that grandparents can have that kind of spirit. And of course they do, so Doro has a new grandbaby. Yes. I expect you'll be sliding down the slide.
I will be doing that and more. I will embarrass everyone to death, but that's okay. So what traditions have you inherited from your grandparents? And what ways have you found to honor their memories and keep those traditions alive?
Mm-hmm. I think they're traditions for sure, but I think the main thing that I think about is how meaningful their lives were, and not just in sort of the ambitious way, not just in their job titles, but in like all these little things they did to create meaning. And so that's something, and these aren't necessarily traditions, but it's more of like a call to action. When I think about what I want my life to look like, am I living a meaningful enough life? Mm-hmm. And Gamby did all of these things that none of us even really knew about, but I think he just really believed in service and lived it. And then also just the relationship that they had, and with their kids. I also realized in writing this that I don't remember, I remember what I remember I wrote in the book, but I definitely remember the way it felt to be sitting at that table, next to Gamby or across down, even when I was in the kids' table, I'm not far away from them. Everybody wanted to be in their glow. And that is, as a mom with 3 little kids and sometimes bad patients, that's a hard thing to create, like a feeling in your house.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm working on. That's my priority, is my family. And they created a family that really loved each other, and that finds solace even now in each other. Not even now, but especially now or always. And I think that to me that's a tradition, I think, of love and family and how you do it. Better. Doro's raised kids that are crazy about each other. And more than that, they kind of fight over attention for who's her favorite too. But Robert is your favorite.
No, I love him, but he's not my favorite. But
how did you do it?
How did I do what? How did
create a family that just?
I think, again, it's you live from examples in your life. And my, mom, I had the benefit of their example as parents. You had them as grandparents. And so Dad always said, my greatest success in life is that my children still want to come home. Well, that's my greatest success in life too, is that they want to come and be with me and be together. So I don't know.
So as a young mom, I mean, that's what I work on every day. That's the tradition of family that I hope to create. And in theory, it seems simple, but really I think it's one of the hardest things to do.
Yeah. Well, so far so good, I think, for you.
So, yeah, they still like me enough.
They love you.
Although Mila said I was the worst mommy ever when I wouldn't let her have gum just now.
Well, she didn't mean it. So we talked about public grief. That was going to be my next question, but we've talked about that, and you do address that so beautifully in the book. But I think people remember that you lived in the White House, and they want to know, what is your first memory of the White House? And talk a little bit about that.
Question. And with the public grief, just to wrap a little bow on it, the one thing, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, is that when your grief is most raw, it feels hard to hear that kind of stuff. But wouldn't you agree that as time has gone by, public grieving is like the best gift in the world, because people will come up to you and say, I loved your dad, or let me tell you this story about your dad or your grandpa. And then you're like, oh, wait, it stinks at the beginning, but there's this beauty, right?
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I loved when you said that in the book. And I also wanted to say about that is we did share our grandparents and my parents with the world. And that is hard to do. But as the years go by, so it's been 2 years since Dad died. And I found myself on November 30th, which was the day he died, watching his funeral again. Hearing all, John Meacham and Prime Minister Mulrooney and Alan Simpson, very funny man, and your dad, who, and weeping all over again. And it was just, sort of time without the public and without everything to think about them, and then looking through the beautiful book that was made from the funeral. So there's a time for everything.
Yes.
And I think, for us, we had to have that public experience. But as the years go by, we can have our moments,
Yeah. I mean, you realize that it's almost a gift, because a lot of people lose people they love. And there is, particularly now, I lost my father-in-law during this summer. And it was just 6 of us at his funeral because of COVID. And so to have these memories of this ceremony and these beautiful eulogies with tons of people there, particularly in this time, does feel like a gift. So you're right. It's everything is in its time. And so even when things hurt as bad as they do, which they did, and feel wrong, they're going to be right again. And so I love that you watched that.
Yeah. So yes. So.
Oh, you asked me. Sorry, I didn't. I just went on a total.
The White House.
The White House.
No.
Yeah. So the first time we went to the White House, Doro was there. I was 7. Do you remember how old you were?
I was 30 something, and I had 2 little children.
Yeah. So we had all of our little. Yeah. Sam was
a little younger.
Well, if I was 7 or maybe 6, then Sam was 4, but we are 5. And so we were, we had this big family and all of these little grandkids, all of my cousins. And we went for the inauguration, and Barbara and I were shocked by the cold of DC because we were Texas kids, but and then to go back every year around Christmas time, which we're getting into that season now, it isn't decorated like a normal house. There's trees everywhere, and you just can't even believe the way it smells, the magic of it. And as little kids in particular, although I bet it felt magical to you too, Doro, it felt you just can't even, I mean, it makes me almost weepy because you can't believe the splendor of it. And so to get a place like that with a huge family of people, of little kids who we ran around and kind of were free and, had a wonderful time with it, decorated so beautifully. So those 4 years we went every Christmas. And then my dad continued that tradition, which I'm so glad he did.
Yeah.
Because that gave us 12 years, thought I was doing the math wrong, of family Christmases. And they're really, there really aren't that, again, a mustard color. There really aren't places where you can take, a family that huge, except the White House. And then we would go to Camp David for right after Christmas.
Well, that was a gift to all of us, but I felt especially because I never thought I'd go back to the place where I got married, and I got married at Camp David. And if your dad hadn't become president, I don't think I'd ever have gone back to that church. So
I know how, and then you spent Christmases with your kids that you all had together there. That I never even thought about that. That is very magical. And Christmases in that chapel, it's a small chapel. It's a Navy. Is it Air Force?
It's a military base.
Military base.
It's called Evergreen, the chapel.
And so it, was filled with people, military men and women and their husbands and wives and kids, little kids. So the church existed with or without us, but we would come in and there'd be a pageant, and it just felt like a community. I mean, my parents, and I think Gampy and Gainey too, really loved it there.
Yeah.
They would go, not that we would really have anywhere else to go, but they would go there, I think, starting with Gampy and Gainey, because they didn't want the Secret Service to be away from their families on Christmas. So if they were at Camp David, there didn't have to be, it wasn't like they were traveling far. Mm-hmm. And then my parents continued that tradition, but thank goodness for us.
Mm-hmm. It was amazing. So we talked a little bit about this, but all of your grandparents were prolific letter writers. And in the book, and I've marked, those are notes, so many wonderful letters from mom and dad, and letters from you that you wrote at different times in your life to your children or to Gainey and Gampy. Mm-hmm.
That's the church at Camp David. Somebody's really working on that internet. Whoever's doing the slide, that is the beautiful little church that Doro was married in, and that we continued to go.
Yeah, there it is. It's so pretty.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, letter writing, how important is that in your life? And did that obviously came maybe from your grandparents? And
yeah, it definitely came from both sets, but Gainey and Gampy, as you already mentioned, both of them, but Gampy in particular was almost a prolific in that the quality of his writing was like reading the most beautiful poetry you've ever read. He wrote beautiful letters. And I think that they are really a part of our family. They're a part of the fabric of who we are. And so to have those letters, and you probably have copies of the letters that Gampy wrote to Gainey, the love letters during World War II, which are just like, you can't even believe how romantic and how beautiful they are. Mm-hmm. So to have those feels like a real gift. So the truth is, yes, they started the third tradition, but also nobody could write a letter as beautiful as he could.
Yeah,
and so
you wrote some pretty good letters in this book, one of which was the letter you wrote to Malia and Sasha, which was so sweet.
Well, we wrote them a letter. We wrote 2 letters, and we published them, so they were open letters. Because when Malia and Sasha, and I don't know if y'all have these pictures, but when they were about Barbara and my age when their dad became president. Mm-hmm. So we took a day off I was a teacher in Baltimore and Barbara was working in New York City. We took the day the afternoon off and drove to meet my mom. She had said to Mrs. Obama, come see, I think Mrs. Obama said to my mom, I'm nervous about the girls changing schools. And, they mainly talked about their kids, which I think is so typical of mothers, right? We always are worried. She was less worried about the responsibilities than she was about her children's happiness, which I think unites mothers. And so my mom said, well, bring them. That's us, but we're not together there. I can't believe how fast y'all are putting the slides together. There's pictures on my Instagram, if you're interested, whoever's doing that, of them as little girls and us showing them around the White House. But anyway, my mom said, come and let me show the girls around, because that might make them feel less nervous and you less nervous, and show them their bedrooms. And my mom is such a designer like this. She said, and you can decide who gets what room, and you can kind of lay out however you need and kind of figure out what you need so that they can move in. And so she said, great. And we met them, and they were 7 and 9. I think they were almost our exact age when our Gampy became president. So it was so much fun because we saw the light in their eyes, the excitement of seeing this house for the first time, and also the nervousness. So we wrote them a letter just about the incredible privilege of living history. And then also, and this is what we kind of talked about earlier, the difficulty of sharing your father.
Yeah, I love that.
Some people are going to love him and some people aren't. And
yeah.
Do you have it right there?
Yes. And I loved what you said about that. And you said, he's our father, not the sketch in a paper or part of a sketch. Remember who your dad really is. Mm-hmm. And that is because, the small club that has had a father who's president, that's hard. That's hard to see things in the news when it's not true. And it's, as you also said in the book, people are more than two-dimensional. And you described your dad in the book. And so that was so dear that you all did that for them.
Well, and it's interesting because sometimes Barbara and I forgot that my dad was also a president. And actually it makes sense how compassionate he was to Barbara and me, how meaning if we made mistakes, and we did, that he was sorry for us too. Because if we were just Joe Schmo, which they raised us to be, everybody's like, we get, Barbara and I get this a lot, which is a compliment. We'll take it as that. But they're like, y'all are so normal. Well, we had lived in Midland and then Dallas, and we were raised really normally. So then even though Gampy and Gainey were president, even though we got to enjoy the beauty of it, we were far from it and we were young. Mm-hmm. And so but I kind of forget that, of course, he had that compassion because he knew what it was like too. And he always has said that hearing his father criticized was far worse than hearing himself. Mm-hmm. That hurt so much that it gave him a thick skin. He didn't take it personally when somebody,
he didn't read the things people were saying about it.
He didn't watch TV and worry about it because, and that was a blessing for him in some ways. And I think that is who he is anyway. He doesn't care. He's pretty solid and sure of himself, and doesn't need the adoration nor the, get frustrated with the criticism either. But that
of us have to agonize over it all.
I know that part was hard, and I think I wanted to prepare them for that because I even remember it being hard. And I don't know if Ellie or Sam have said this, but even with Gampy, even as a little kid, there was one of my first memories around him was seeing this Newsweek magazine that said "wimp" on it.
Oh, God.
And I could read it. I was a little kid, but I could read the word. And "wimp" was one of those 80s words that were used on the playground. It was like something it said "wimp factor." Mm-hmm. But, little kids use that word about the little kid.
Yeah, it's mean.
It was a mean word that was used and tossed around. So I understood it, but I didn't understand it because it was above this man that not, even then I didn't know he was a World War II hero, but he was our hero, and he was loving and would, courageous and would get on the ground and play with us and was giving as a grandfather. So the word did not fit the picture. And that was even hard. So I can't even imagine as an older, I can't imagine because I went through it too. I keep forgetting, but it hurts. And so we wanted to just give them a warning of the beauty of the job of first daughter, which has no definition, no rule book, no guidelines, and then also some of the hardship of it.
Yeah, it was so great. So this book is about family, and this has been such a difficult year for so many people. How have you stayed and connected to the people that are most important in your life?
Well, at the beginning of the pandemic, we were, alone, just us, just us, my 3 kids and Henry, and we would do week Zoom. I guess every other week Zoom on a Sunday with our whole extended family, which was kind of hilarious because frankly, we were not doing that before, we would see each other.
Kind of forced.
It felt kind of forced, but it also felt kind of sweet because it made us laugh. And it, it was a little tough for us because it was right in the middle of Hal's dinner time. So he would be screaming. But it also, I think Ganny and Gampy would have loved it. And so we did that. That's Hallow. He's now a full-on walking, running toddler. And then, with my parents, it's been hard because I only got to see them for a couple days this summer. And I wish it had been longer. And now, I hope I'll get to see them over the holidays, but we may have to cancel just because that's what people are recommending.
Yeah.
And that is hard. It's hard because particularly to little kids who are like, but why aren't we going to Texas? We've gone every year. Like the ranch to them means means Christmas.
Yeah.
But I talk to my parents a lot on the phone. I text with my dad and with Doro and with Barbara every morning, although I have been really bad about reading. We read a Christian meditation, a daily meditation, and I've been really bad about keeping up with the reading. I'll admit it right here. And so
I forgive you because we're Christian.
Well, that's the right type of Christianity. Anyway, that's my New Year's resolution, but at least I wake up to reading their Bible verse. It good. Feels, like a way to stay connected.
Yeah. So we saw that cute little picture of Hal there.
Yes.
And so this book is about a year of loss.
Mm-hmm.
For you and for all of us, but you did give birth to Hal.
Yes.
At an incredibly difficult time. How did you give yourself permission to feel joy when there's so much sadness around you?
That's such a beautiful question because I feel like this year when I've talked with a lot of people that have had joyous moments, they've had a hard time allowing themselves the joy. Like when we've asked people at work on the show, they have a wonderful thing happening, but they're feeling bad about it, and I think particularly this year, the balance between happiness and joy when the world is hurting so bad is difficult for people. For me, kids, and I feel like this is, you can use this now, even if you're feeling sadness, because a lot of people are. Kids are the ultimate joy. So just allowing yourself to be with them, to find the joy in them, watching Mila and Poppy in the months leading up to Ganny and Gampy's death, and then afterwards was just the most, I will never forget. I hope that I always remind them, even when they're my age, how meaningful it was to have these precious, innocent, joyful beings who would comfort me and say things like, for example, we knew I would have to cry at some point. But when Gampy died, and Doro mentioned it was on November 30th, which was, we knew that there was a week-long thing. And so it was, kind of right before Christmas. And so we had gone to bed early, like we always do, Henry and I had. And so we didn't know the news until the next morning. And I woke up to, a lot of text messages. And the girls woke up at the same time as us. And I said to Henry, just stay in here for a minute, get yourself together. I'll get you coffee. I'm going to keep the kids out for a second because they probably didn't want to see me. And I said to Henry, right when he was closing the door, I can't believe this is happening right before Christmas. And then the door closed, and then Henry told the girls, and Mila said, well, Daddy, of course it's happening right before Christmas. Gampy had to get up there to decorate the Christmas tree with Annie. And it just was such a touching and poignant reminder of what, matters. And that, yes, we were losing him, but he was going to a better place. And the fact that kids can share that so freely and easily without worry or judgment reminds you where we find the joy. And if we live like them, we would be more joyful too,
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, you're crying. You're crying. And there's...
By the way, I'm very impressed with your strength, Doro. I feel like you're doing a great job. Are you dehydrated? That's what I normally ask Barbara when she doesn't cry.
No, I'm just trying to be the adult in the room.
Okay, I'm proud of you.
It's very hard to do. But speaking of crying, you actually made a list in the book.
Yes, I do.
Times I have cried, and it's only a partial list because there have been many more times. But I do think I can completely relate because I'm a crier too. But you mentioned things like, of course, walking down the aisle to marry Henry. That's
yes. Yes.
At all Kleenex commercials.
Which is ironic.
But all the different times you cried, and this seems to be a gene in our family.
It is. And you know what? It's so funny because people, and I don't take it personally, but people are like on Twitter, like, why? What is like somebody's commenting on your crying again? And I'm like, I honestly try to hold back the emotions, but I can't help it. And Gampy, that was one of his rules to live by, which was to cry when somebody's hurt, when a friend is hurting, or like, it's okay to cry. And now that I'm raising a little boy, not that, my girl, everybody cries freely, it's fine. But I do think that's a Brit for especially in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, for a man to feel so much that he allowed himself tears, which our Gampy definitely did. My dad does.
Especially towards the end. I was weeping. Okay, this is the second time I've read your book because the first time was the galley, remember? And I was supposed to do
yes,
an enrichment.
Were you okay with what I wrote about you?
Yes. Thank you. I don't know, but yes.
Okay.
But I don't.
Doro is I wish I had the foresight to find the part where I wrote about Doro because it's very. I felt, well, it's true. Everybody in our family has asked Doro to marry them because she's so wise and has the best of both of her parents.
So sweet. But what I was going to say was back to crying. When the second time I read the hardcover book to prepare for tonight, and I was weeping and tell the story, and I've already cried it out, so I'm not going to cry again, but tell the story about when you and Jebby on Dad's 93rd, his first birthday after Mom died. It was his 3rd. Mm-hmm. Was it his 94th?
Wait, 94th, right?
94th birthday, where we had a birthday cake for Dad. Mm-hmm. It was also...
We had a birthday cake, and I remember, and you will remember that we didn't really know if he was going to be able to come,
right? Because
that summer he would come sometimes to meals and have a great time, and sometimes he would just say, "I need to eat in my room," and And he came and he was all dressed up and looked great and so handsome. We towards the end, everybody ate and then everybody left. And I'm not sure, I'm trying to even rationalize why it was just the three of us left. I think people went to walk the dogs.
Yeah, to walk the gate.
And to walk to the gate and walk with the dogs and then it was time for bed and we sat with him, Jebby and I, and we just at first were making small talk and he was in the mood to talk. He wanted to talk. Yeah. And then he said, do you think I'll ever miss her less? He brought it up about Ganny. And we said, do you miss her, Gampy? And we, all three of us, and Jebby too. I mean, I'm wondering now if Jebby, I said afterward to Jebby, I'm like, did you not think that was so profound? And he said, yes, but I think it also hurt, but it was beautiful. And I think, and I don't know if this is true, but I don't know if it's a conversation my dad could have had with Gampy, just because it would have really hurt, maybe I'm wrong.
Well, no, I think, and I also think because it was you and Jebby and nobody he had to, be the father for, he could be weak.
So he said, well, I miss her less. And then we all wept. He was weeping. We were hugging, and just with each other, and then we told stories. And what I remember, and I wish I called my dad afterwards to tell him, I just was going to say, you're not going to believe this conversation we had with Gampy. And he said, write it all down. And I wrote a little bit, but I was so emotionally exhausted because from maybe 7:30 until 9, it got dark. And somebody brought us Kleenexes and we sat in this room until it was dark. I cried and wept and laughed and had a wonderful conversation. And Jebby and Gampy talked about all of their favorite fishing trips they ever went on. At some point we veered because we told the funny stories about Ganny chewing people out. We tried to laugh and Gampy would laugh and then we would cry and then we would laugh. So my dad said, write it all down. You're going to want to remember it. Write it all down. So I wrote a little and then I fell asleep because I was just so, it was just and so even the description of it isn't as profound as it actually was. It was one of the most important nights of my life. And I can't even really articulate why, but I think we all have those. Yeah. A lovely conversation with the man I love.
It was a moment for him because there were nights on end. He wouldn't, he wanted to just eat in the bedroom and be quiet and be alone. And
that was really the first summer that he was like that, that it felt, or at least to me, maybe I'm wrong, but that was, Gampy, my parents are a little bit reclusive. I love them, but they're a little bit reclusive. Gampy and Ganny loved people. Yeah. They wanted to go to the theater. They wanted to go to dinners. They had Billy Bush, the fisherman, over. And then the next night, and actually John Meacham says this so well, which is hilarious, but that, he would go to Maine when he was working on the books and he never knew who he was going to find there, from the local lobster man to and you would know better, the fancy people.
He never met a stranger. Just everybody was a friend.
And he liked to be around people.
Living room at some point or another.
I know. So for him to not want to be with people, to me, felt different.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I have to ask you, because we're here talking about your book, but you're such a friend to authors, and Jenna's Today Show book club has been such a huge hit. And so how do you choose the books for your book club?
Well, I read a lot. We just chose, and I'm really excited about it, Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. Oh, are you reading it?
I'm starting it because I just finished the last book about
Leave the World Behind.
Leave the World Behind.
Did you like it? It was creepy.
Wonderful, but creepy.
This book, and I'm excited because I'm doing an hour-long special with Oprah. So I just talked to Oprah about The Bluest Eye for 1 hour. Oh, I was like, I know, it was so much fun. It's her favorite book of all time. And she knew Toni Morrison. I never got to meet her. But this book as a high schooler, as a sophomore in high school, it was the first book that I said, this is my favorite book. And now that I've reread it a couple of times, and particularly this last reading, I wondered why I loved it so much. And I think it's because it's the first book that taught me that although my life, it's about a young Black girl named Pecola, whose life is very different than mine. Mm-hmm. But because Toni Morrison is a magician with words, I felt like I was Pecola, I could empathize. And what it taught me was that books can change you, can teach empathy, can teach you about people that have totally different plights than yours. Mm-hmm. And so I'm doing a special, and I also talked with the teacher who teaches it, and a woman who created this awesome organization called Well-Read Black Women. And it's really fun. And I think people, anyway, I want to make this clear. Toni Morrison did not need me to choose her book. She sold millions of copies. She's an incredible writer, but I just felt like we needed Toni Morrison, or I needed to reread this book, particularly this year, in a year of a lot of social reckoning. And as a mother, I loved rereading it. And so I choose books that speak to me at certain moments. I choose books. I try to look at it through the year. So if we have a lot of heavy themes, I try to kind of choose lighter ones. I have a really fun group of book club members who are very, very active. And they said, well, where is a historical fiction book? We've been wanting one. So I chose 2 for February, and so I think it's just books that I love, books. I try to choose diverse debut novelists. There's a lot of really good ones for the spring, particularly debut novelists, because we know right now during COVID, it's hard to publish books and get anybody to pay attention. Yeah. So it's so much fun, though. I mean, I know you would feel the same way as somebody that loves books, to be able to have this as part of your job, to be able to curl up and read The Bluest Eye and not feel guilty about it in the middle of the day is awesome.
That's my job. So that sounds like you picked them far out. I mean, you've already
I've chosen through May.
Wow.
Right. I know. So I'm reading the summer books, which is fun because, summer books are usually lighter and mysteries and fun things, which will be fun during Christmas. But I have a lot of readers. If you're interested in being one of my forward readers, Doro, I have a group of forward readers.
I'm already one of your readers.
I know you're one of my book club, but if you want to read books that haven't come out yet, I'm happy for you to be part of that team.
I like to do that. I want to do that.
Okay, good.
So now I'm going to ask you a few questions that people who are here with us tonight want to know, some things they want to know. And here's one thing. What is your most memorable story that you've reported on the Today Show?
Well, so there's 2. The most memorable are the conversations I got to have with Gampy, because I would never have had conversations like that with him otherwise, even though we had wonderful family conversations. But I could ask him, we talked, I think I interviewed him for his 88th birthday, and we talked about really poignant, beautiful things, like what it was like during being a young man during World War II. And those are just not the types of things you really bring up. And he definitely probably wouldn't have brought him up. But so those, and just because I loved them so much, to be able to have those for me and for our family, for my kids. And then the other one is Maya Angelou. I got to interview her when I was hugely pregnant with Mila, my first baby. And I was in her Harlem townhouse brownstone in her living room. And she had written a book. I mean, and this is why it was so profound. Whoever's doing this slideshow can come work with me, because they're finding these pictures and it's amazing. That's when I got to talk with my grandpa and dad about the book my dad wrote about Gampy. so Maya Angelou, but what was really poignant about it is she had just written a book called Mom, Me, Mom. And it was a book about her mother, and teaching her how to be a mother to her. She was a single mother to her son. And so reading this by this amazing woman, and I know that word is overused, but she truly was, while I was hugely pregnant, getting to meet with her and talk to her about motherhood. I mean, I just still can't believe, I don't know how you just found that picture. Who is doing this? It's amazing.
Aren't they doing a good job?
I'm not joking. If you want a new job, contact me. But that is me largely pregnant, sitting in Maya Angelou's living room. And then afterwards I stayed and we discussed more, and I sat with her really until it was bedtime. And so those are my two favorite.
And let's see, other people want to know. Somebody else wants to know, what do you think is the best way we can all continue to honor and perpetuate the legacy of your grandparents?
I mean, I think service, probably. I think that they would say service.
I think
right? Service, giving back. And this year it is important to Henry and I that Christmas is less about gifts. Santa is going to give one gift to each of the kids. And then we're trying to do service projects every week in between Thanksgiving and Christmas, because when the world hurts, it's hard to, worry just about what you should purchase and more about how you should give back.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I try to do to continue their legacy in my own family. And it doesn't have to be loud. I mean, Gampy was so, we just took kids' presents and up in Harlem and went and purchased gifts. And it's not something that needs to even really be talked about. But I would say service, maybe reading for Ganny and literacy.
Yeah. And I would add this, and this is from your book, and it's a quote, and I guess I would say, hug those you love close and stay connected with people, because it's human connections that are so important. And you put this quote in your book that I love, and it's this is from Mom's commencement address.
Mm-hmm.
For several years, you've had impressed upon you the importance to your career of dedication and hard work. And of course, that's true. But as important as your obligations as a doctor, lawyer, or a business leader will be, you are a human being first. And those human connections with spouses, with children, with friends, with neighbors are the most important investments you'll ever make.
Wasn't that such a beautiful speech? And it's so true. I mean, I think that when I was trying to say, how do you emulate a house that just felt filled with love and joy? Like, that's what that's my life's work every single day. How do I do that? Mm-hmm. And it's not, when you have little kids, and I hope some of you agree with me, it's not always easy, but it's the most important work that we'll do.
Yeah. Maybe we should end, because you have your beloved sister, Barbara, mm-hmm. who we love very much as well. And you and she wrote Sisters First together. And mm-hmm. in the book, you describe her, and I'm going to see if I can find it, as Barbara. She's all heart and all action. And she's also a dreamer. So tell us about Barbara. Give everyone an update on what she's doing.
Barbara is all heart and all action, and she does not need any credit either. And she is here in New York, which is so much fun for me because we can be able to see each other. So she was able to come with me for Thanksgiving, which I loved, to be with her and my kids. And even though my parents weren't there, Barbara was, which made it feel festive and like an occasion, mm-hmm. And not just another Thursday day. And she is happily married. She met her husband on our book tour, which is hilarious, because who meets somebody on a book tour? But we were in Atlanta, And she was like, I'm going to go meet this guy for drinks. And I was like, no, stay here with me. So she did, which sounds more like me as a sister. But then he came later that evening and I got to meet him too. And she said, do not invite him to the book event. Whatever you do not invite him, because the book event is like this. It's like bearing your soul in front of a lot of women. And although there may be one or two men there. And so I invited him. And Barbara was like, no, but he came and they're now married. And she is working for Eric Schmidt's foundation, doing awesome work. She's working on COVID-19 and help making sure that people will get the vaccine, which is like, she's interested in public health. So this is really important to her and really good work. And so I'm just so happy. And she's the best aunt in the entire world.
She is. And how are your beloved parents, who I adore? And
don't you talk to them?
I talk to them
every day.
Yeah, all the time. But
they are great. They are doing well. They are kind of, this is not that I'm going to name drop Oprah again, but I will. Oprah was like, I am doing just fine in the pandemic. She was like, people are hurting, but she's like, I get to, be at home with Stedman and read. And, and I find my parents, even though of course nobody likes what's happening with our country and with the world, and they hate not seeing people, they're also kind of reclusive by nature. They sort of are, even though I'm sure they miss their grandkids. I know they do. And I know they miss you. And I know they miss me and Henry. And, but I think, they're enjoying nature and being together and have been beautiful. They were with you all summer. So, they've been with people, just small pods.
Yeah. Yeah. So
they're great. You know what? If we're ending, if it's okay with you, I just got a book. Can I end with the way that I end the book, or do you have any more questions for me?
I think we should end it. It's been an hour, so.
Okay. Well, first, thank you, Doro. This was so much fun. Thank you to everybody watching. This is how I end the book, which I think is a nice way to end tonight. Okay, here we go. After Mila and Poppy were born, we rushed to Maine to show them off to my grandparents. When we took Hal to Maine for the first time, it was a leisurely trip to spend the final weekend of summer with my mom and dad. Walking around without my Ganny and Gampy there, I listened to Hal's baby sounds in chorus with the crickets. I thought of how in Charlotte's Web, the crickets felt it was their duty to warn everybody that summertime cannot last forever. Even on the most beautiful days in the whole year, the days when summer is changing into fall, the crickets spread the rumor of sadness and change. I love that quote from Charlotte. And by the way, if you haven't read Charlotte's Web to your kids or grandkids, put that onto your to-do list. It's just beautiful. Fall and the next season of sorrow would surely come. But that weekend, it was still summer. Mila and Poppy were tanned, their feet tough from running around barefoot. Their baby brother was seeing the ocean for the first time. And together, we all took the ceremonial post-dinner stroll, walking in silence, pushing Hal in his stroller. The night was warm and quiet as we walked down the driveway. When we reached the end a few minutes later, we paused. It's only about a quarter of a mile, just long enough to see the sunset or spot the first evening star. I thought about my grandparents entering Heaven's Gate and about Marshall Ramsey's image of Ganny's reunion there with Robin. And here were our gates. I touched the cold metal and then turned around. Now what? Asked Poppy. It was her first trip. She didn't understand that there was no purpose, but beyond spending a moment together after a meal and getting a little exercise before bed. Now we go back, I said. She shrugged, turned around, and began trudging back towards the house in the twilight, her ponytail swaying as she went. This is the life, I thought, echoing a line my mother spoke upon being handed her two babies. This is what life is all about, until it's your time to enter the gates of heaven and join those in your family who have died. You walk to the gate, and then you walk back. You hope that the sky is clear so you can see the moon glowing over the ocean. and you hope always to walk with those you love by your side.
Oh, Jenna, that's so beautiful.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you, Doro, and thank you all so much for all your support of the library. We can't wait to be back in College Station.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Bye, everybody. Merry Christmas.
Merry
Thank
Christmas.
you, Doro. Love you.
Love
Bye.
you too.